Dragon Age and Jade Empire are beloved, if forgotten in the case of Jade Empire, games from the RPG powerhouse BioWare. I have a radical theory about how these two different game series are connected. In this video, I'll show you exactly why both game settings are actually the same world, thus retroactively making the forgotten jewel Jade Empire actually a long-lost Dragon Age title. Not only that, but I can show you exactly where the two regions are in relation to each other, using in-game lore from both series that seem to explicitly refer to each other, so stay tuned for that. Before I dive into the theory, a bit of background on Jade Empire, since there are way more Dragon Age fans than there are Jade Empire fans. Jade Empire was BioWare's first game using their own original IP. It was originally an Xbox exclusive, and it came out in 2005, shortly before the release of the Xbox 360. In Jade Empire, you play as the Spirit Monk, a martial artist who embarks on a journey to rescue their master from the evil Lotus assassins and various other threats. You'll do so by exploring a small chunk of the Jade Empire itself, picking up companions along the way, maybe romancing them, and using martial arts styles, weapons, and magic abilities. You encounter pirates, ghosts, demons, spirits, and more as you make decisions that follow either the path of the open palm or the closed fist. Meanwhile, the Dragon Age series needs practically no introduction. In a land cursed with a supernatural blight, it's plagued by war and cultural tensions, and beset by otherworldly and ancient powers, our heroes are flawed characters who are forced to make impossible decisions that will affect the fate of the entire world. Also, they say silly things like,
"Zap, frog time."
I think that although these two game series have very different aesthetics, they both belong to the same world in terms of the lore. And I'll start with what I would consider actual evidence for this theory, and after that, I'll make some additional comparisons between the two that demonstrate how they aren't that different, actually. So let's get started. This is the best map of Thedas, the Dragon Age setting. That's actually what Thedas stands for, the Dragon Age setting. This is the best map we have. So according to lore found in-game and other sources like the World of Thedas books, there are, of course, lands that are beyond this one, beyond Thedas. To the north are islands past Parvalan, including a place called Parladi. There's a mysterious realm to the east, sometimes called Amaranth, and there's frozen plains to the south in the Sunless Lands. This is because Thedas, this region, is actually in the planet's southern hemisphere, so south is cold and north is warm. But here's the bigger question, what is to the west? So the western side of the map has three major parts. First, there are the Dawnarks to the north, that we know almost nothing about, except that there are people there, and that the coast continues north for some distance. To the south are the Hunterhorn Mountains, which house the dwarven Taig Kal Sharok. This dwarven city was thought to be lost for centuries, but was recently rediscovered. And between the two is a sea known as the Volca Sea, which has a single settlement on the Thedas side of things. It's in the Anderfels, and it's called Laish, though it's no longer a functioning town as far as we know. So what's on the other side of this edge of the map? In Dragon Age Inquisition, during the Here Lies the Abyss quest, you encounter both the Champion of Kirkwall, that's the player character from Dragon Age 2, as well as a Grey Warden. When asked about the hero of Ferelden, if the player romanced Leliana in Dragon Age Origins, Leliana has this to say: "Their quest took them far to the west, to lands that have never known the blight." Now, isn't that interesting? Leliana sounds confident here as well. She doesn't say lands that are rumored to have never known the blight. She straight up says lands that have never known the blight. And if the spy master of the Chantry says something with that much authority, I'm inclined to believe her. I believe other characters in the game tell a similar story as well, but I couldn't find the quotes. This entry on the Mysterious West can be found in Dragon Age: The World of Thedas Volume 2, on page 132. You can pause and read the entire section if you want, but it goes into greater detail about the town of Laish. We have no idea how large the Volca Sea is, because we can only see a small piece of it on the map. and no Thedosian ships have ever voyaged to the lands beyond and back again successfully. But ships have come from there, from unknown lands beyond. They're known as the Voshai, traders who learned just enough of the local language to barter and nothing more. Their cargo ships, their wares and spices, and their customs were all very strange to the people of Laish and Thedas. The Voshai were also described as being very interested in lyrium. Presumably, they didn't have this magical material wherever they came from. Interestingly, each Voshai ship was captained by a dwarf, presumably with human crew members, but there was not a single elf to be seen. At some point, the Voshai ships stopped coming, and Laish fell to ruin since they depended on trade from Voshai to justify the town's existence. Some Tevinter merchant houses tried to cross the sea to restart trade relations, but they never returned. And then recently, there have been reports of Voshai coming to Thedas once again, carrying rumors about some kind of great cataclysm taking place in their homeland. But we don't know anything else from Dragon Age. And in case you're thinking this is just some random piece of lore that was only brought up that one time with no relevance, you can also refer to a codex entry in Veilguard called Beyond the Sea, where Emmerich responds to Belara's inquiries about that very topic. He covers a lot of the same information, including speaking on Laish and the Voshai. He also reinforces how there haven't really been any successful sea voyages to and from lands outside of Thedas, period. So it's been brought up in-game as well as in the official lore books. So what's the big deal? Why is this so important? To answer that, let's take a look at the Jade Empire side of things. I think this is going to be really cool. So first of all, this is the in-game map of the Jade Empire. It only shows a chunk of the empire and only notes these 3 distinct locations, and the rest we have to figure out on our own based on the lore, which you can find in book stands and scroll stands in-game. Here's a better resolution for the map. This is pulled from the game data. And I added these labels myself, based on, again, information found in-game. We know that east of this is a province known as the Prosperous East, which is also part of the Jade Empire. This body of water on the bottom is known as the Glass Ocean, or the Ocean of Glass. And across this ocean is the Mysterious East, home to a culture of strange people who are eager to trade for silk and spices. Yes, you heard that right. The Dragon Age lore speaks of a mysterious west across a large body of water, with lands free from the Blight and rich in silks and spices and home to peoples unfamiliar with Thedas, and the Jade Empire lore speaks of a mysterious east across a large body of water with lands rich in metals and home to peoples unfamiliar to the Jade Empire. It's literally that explicit. Mysterious West, Mysterious East for each game respectively. Here's the Jade Empire proof. Here's the text from the scroll stand on the Mysterious East from Jade Empire. And this description lines up almost exactly with the description from Dragon Age about the lands to the west of the Volca Sea. The people of Laish were impressed by the wares and spices of the Voshai culture, and in this description, we see that the people of the Mysterious East had large quantities of gold and other metals. This, coupled with the interesting coincidence that both the Glass Ocean and the Volca Sea have very similar names, each perhaps referring to volcanic glass, points to these bodies of water each being one and the same, just going by different names depending on your culture. If this is true, this body of water is the primary point of contact between the 2 regions. This would indicate that the Voshai are a culture of people somewhere on the same landmass as the Jade Empire, presumably part of the Jade Empire itself in the Prosperous East. So, how come trade is so limited? Why do Thedosian ships keep going missing when they try to cross the Volca Sea, and why do Jade Empire fleets often fail to make the passage as well? Well, another Jade Empire bookstand entry might have the answer. This one is the Undertow. And again, you can pause if you want. Basically, it just says that there's some kind of threat the farther east you go across the Glass Ocean. There's shifting currents and strange winds, maybe even a giant monster of some kind, but reports are obviously scarce. And it actually says specifically that the sea currents actually change drawing east. So that would actually kind of make sense if you've got ships that are trying to go west. The currents are against you. Whatever weirdness is going on in that ocean, it's pushing you east. So that would make sense why no ships from Thedas have been able to go there and back again. It's easier to get to Thedas than it is to get to the Jade Empire, if that makes sense. We know that none of the Thedosian ships were able to make a return voyage home, but were any of their ships able to complete the journey to the Jade Empire? Meet Sir Roderick Ponce von Fontelbottom, the Magnificent Bastard, also known in the Jade Empire as the Outlander. He appears in the Scholar's Garden of the Imperial City in the Jade Empire, having been wandering the nation for some time after his ship was blown off course when crossing the Glass Sea. The character is fantastically voiced by John Cleese in the game, and his design is obviously meant to be European-inspired. I would definitely call this a comedic character, but I wouldn't actually call him a joke character. He's the primary focus of an entire quest that's impossible to miss, and his origins tie directly to the lore of the world as seen in the previous bookstands. He's not just thrown in as an Easter egg or a gimmick. He's actually part of the lore. So, could Sir Roderick be from Thedas? He never mentions his own country by name. His appearance is kind of silly, but he does bear a certain resemblance to the art of various Orlesian and Navaran men in the Dragon Age RPG rulebook and World of Thedas volumes. So, despite the comedic nature of his cheese fork chestplate, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say this man might have come from Orlais or maybe Navarra or Antiva. Probably the biggest problem with this part of the theory is his weapon. Sir Roderick has a musket he fondly calls Mirabelle. As of the most up-to-date time period of Dragon Age, we have not seen any personal firearms. The Qunari closely guard the secrets of black powder, or gatlock as they call it, and they do have ship-mounted cannons and sort of heavy artillery that they can carry around, but we've never seen like a true musket or like gun or anything like that. So, to sum up the geography evidence, both games are essentially pointing to each other. Now, obviously, Dragon Age didn't exist yet as a game when Jade Empire was made, though I believe David Gaider had actually already begun working on Thedas, the setting of Dragon Age, by this point. I think what's most likely here is that Jade Empire included this mysterious East as a European-style contrast to their Asia-inspired setting, but they didn't give much thought to it beyond that. And then, when they moved on to making Dragon Age, the writers wanted to keep the possibility open of the two being related to each other. So they gave Thedas a mysterious West that would almost certainly never be explored in the games, with only subtle references to go on. But it was meant to reference the Jade Empire. That's my theory. Now, if that's true, is it just that? Is it just a reference? Is it an obscure Easter egg? Surely the two settings are too dissimilar from each other to be in the same world, right? Well, that's where the rest of this video comes in, as I show you how congruent they actually are. And then at the end, I'll go into some more advanced speculation and show a map of how I think the two realms actually line up with each other, so stay tuned for that as well. First, let's talk about magic, because magic is a really big deal in Dragon Age. Magic in Thedas has a unique stigma attached to it. It is considered dangerous and volatile by most cultures to the point where those naturally gifted with magic, at least in Ferelden and other surrounding countries, are sequestered away in circle towers, where they are guarded and watched over by Templars, who are instructed to kill anyone who appears to be at risk of summoning demons or becoming an abomination. The fear that this instills in the mages often leads them to seek out dark paths in the first place, however. Despite all this danger, there are plenty of mages who never summon demons or become abominations. The Tevinter Imperium is a magocracy. Mages are free to rule and live their lives with Templars as something more like employed protectors rather than jailers and executioners. Magic is so plentiful that entire palaces and massive structures float in the sky completely unbound by gravity. Moving elsewhere in Thedas, there's Navarra, where mages actively summon and work with spirits, using them to animate corpses for their own ends. Now, both these nations are actually quite stable. Obviously, they've got problems because everywhere has problems, but they've been around for centuries, if not thousands of years in the case of Tevinter. Magic is obviously dangerous, especially in cases where mages are pushed into a corner, but incidents are rare enough that in most cases, societies can carry on despite them. Now, magic can be used to conjure barrages of elemental force, such as fire, ice, wind, lightning, earth. It can also be used to shield oneself, to heal, to assault the mind, and a lot more. There's also various esoteric magical traditions that allow you to transform yourself into beasts or siphon the power of blood to accomplish dark feats. Magic also isn't exclusive to mage circles. There's ancient elven magic that has different capabilities, and even the Templars harness a kind of magic of their own, or rather magic nullification. And then others like spirit warriors make bargains for their powers. In the Jade Empire, magic can also be found in many places and can produce many of the same effects. The spirit monk protagonist is capable of many styles of magic, though the ability itself seems fairly rare among most people. Similar to the floating structures in Minrathous, the royal palace in the imperial city, the seat of government for the entire nation, sits on a massive floating island, again, unbound by gravity. There are schools where students are trained in the use of magic, though magic wielders in Jade Empire tend to incorporate more martial artistry into their spells. Some do view these traditions as dangerous and volatile, to the point where some martial schools forbid the use of magic entirely. And certain classes of magic are seen as especially dangerous. Magic seems to run in bloodlines in Jade Empire, similar to Dragon Age, since both Gao the Greater and his son, Gao the Lesser, voiced by Nathan Fillion, are both sorcerers. Here we can see Gao the Lesser preparing a magical flame attack. Then we have Dawnstar, one of your companions in Jade Empire. While we see some other people able to wield elemental magic, she has unique abilities relating to spirits. She can hear them and speak to them when no one else can. This ability certainly wasn't trained, because she views it almost like a curse. If she were in Thedas, she would be labeled a spirit medium, which is a known phenomenon, but maybe somewhat uncommon. In the Dragon Age novel Asunder, Rhys, who's the son of Wynn, is one such spirit medium, able to sense spirits and demons. Magic in the Jade Empire can be used to summon elemental powers, enhance one's strikes, defend oneself, heal, and a lot more. Rare skills even allow one to bind spirits to objects or places, which is something we see in Dragon Age fairly often as well. And there's another rare gift that we see in both settings. Jade Empire features magical transformation styles, allowing your character to temporarily become various creatures in battle. Nothing is really known about this kind of magic in Jade Empire, as the Spirit Monk player character seems to be the only one who can actually use it, that we've seen anyway. Except for maybe Wildflower, who can transform into one of two demonic spirits, though that seems to be more like a spirit possession situation, similar to Anders or Lucanus, or maybe the two talents just aren't that unrelated to each other. You acquire these transformation styles after defeating the real thing in combat, which seems to represent your martial understanding and studying of your foes enough to mimic them using magical energy. You can use this power to transform into several different forms, including some demons, a golem, and a spirit form. In Thedas, mages can learn to transform their bodies in a very similar way. This is most often found in hedge mages or any mages outside the circles, including Morrigan and Flemeth as witches of the wilds. The player character can learn this talent if they themselves are also a mage. The skill is stated to be developed by studying the creature you want to turn into, and you must learn one form at a time. Most mages can transform into animals, or swarms of animals, as in the insect swarm form, though other forms are also possible. Flemeth, for example, can transform into a high dragon. Solus, the dread wolf himself, can transform into a massive wolf creature. In the animated film Dawn of the Seeker, we see an example of a mage transforming himself into a pride demon, showing that even demon forms are possible to learn. But not all transformations are intentional. Magic in Thedas is especially dangerous because of the potential for the mage to attract the attention of a demon and allow it to possess them, turning them into an abomination. This is incredibly dangerous and can lead to mass slaughter and mayhem. But we've never seen someone in Jade Empire transform into an abomination due to using magic, or have we? In Jade Empire, when you reach the Lotus Assassin Fortress, the Spirit Monk protagonist encounters a mage who is attempting a new kind of dangerous magic and requires your assistance. He's been communing with spirits from the spirit realm who have been whispering to him of their willingness to serve. He completes his ritual with the help of his 2 fellow mages, but something goes awry, and the other 2 mages become horrible creatures wreathed in flame and attack immediately. Now, these don't necessarily resemble the kind of abominations we see in Dragon Age. However, I will direct you to the words of Enchanter Brahm, who studies demonic possession in Thedas, as one does. The strength of an abomination depends entirely on the power of the demon that possesses the mage. According to Brahm, the weakest and most common of demons are those of rage. They are the least intelligent and most prone to violent outbursts against the living. They expend their energies quickly, the most powerful of them exhibiting great strength and occasionally the ability to generate fire. Now, doesn't that sound an awful lot like what we just saw? We saw 2 mages become possessed by what certainly seemed like demonic entities as a direct result of tapping into forbidden magics, even by Lotus Assassin standards, erupt into flames, attack the living immediately out of rage, expend their energies quickly, then promptly die. I think if Enchanter Brahm were observing this ritual, he'd pretty confidently say that this was a bona fide rage demon possession. Now, you might have noticed that our foolish Lotus Assassin mage made mention of golems, and you can actually see them in the background of that main hall. In this era of the Jade Empire, golems form the backbone of the new Imperial army due to their many advantages, and are a fairly common foe you face as the protagonist. If you've played Dragon Age Origins, you know that golems are also featured in Thedas, in the deep roads near Orzammar. You also have a potential golem companion named Shale. Golems make a few other appearances in the games and media as well. In Origins, you find the Anvil of the Void, the source of golem creation for the dwarves since ancient times, built by the Paragon Caridin. You come to find out that golems are actually created through the killing of dwarves, their bodies sealed inside the stone or metal, and infused with molten lyrium poured inside through the eye holes and joints. This is no doubt a very traumatic kind of death. The golems are then bound to service with enchanted control rods. A golem without such control does retain their free will. In Jade Empire, you also discover the creation process for golems. The golem bodies are created using complex machines and made from clay, bronze, or other materials. Once ready, the golem husk is then infused with a spirit shard to animate it. And how are spirit shards made? You guessed it, you have to use mortal spirits. The Lotus Assassins sometimes use spirits of the already deceased, but those spirits are considered unstable and not very useful. So, they turn to sacrificing captives in the Soul Extractor, a brutal process that kills them and converts their essence into a spirit shard. Lyrium is obviously not mentioned in this process, and we don't know exactly how the Soul Extractor functions, but it's apparent that suffering is key to the process, which definitely makes it seem more akin to blood magic in Thedas, which can be a substitute for lyrium for those with the knowledge to do so. The operator of the Soul Extractor explicitly says, the more painful the death, the better. In the case of these golems, the Jade Golem acts as a kind of control rod for the other smaller golems under its command, though a Lotus Assassin would be the one controlling the Jade Golem itself. We don't know exactly how that works, though. Perhaps there's a control rod involved, perhaps it's a different mechanism entirely. I talked about blood magic. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that topic. In Dragon Age, blood magic is the practice of using blood as a fuel to increase magical power beyond what is normally possible. It also opens the door to certain abilities that can only be used with blood magic, such as the domination of bodies and wills. It is also used in certain profane or dangerous rituals, such as the joining, the desecration of the Urn of Sacred Ashes, the creation of mage phylacteries, and more. Although nothing is ever referred to as blood magic in Jade Empire, and we never see anything quite like a traditional blood mage, we do see that blood can have powerful ramifications when it comes to magic. I already mentioned the use of life force and the importance of suffering in the creation of golems in the Soul Extractor. But we also see a few interesting cases of magic that bears a few similarities to blood magic. The spirit monks have the ability to bind spirits to places or objects, but this power can be abused, and doing so usually seems to involve blood or suffering of some kind. And you can even bind the souls of the living, but that is even more forbidden and taboo. For example, the Emperor claims spirit monk powers for himself, and is able to murder his traitorous brother Sun Qin and bind his spirit to a suit of armor. Later, your spirit monk protagonist can use the blood of your companions to siphon away the water dragon's power for yourself. She's a powerful spirit or deity. Similarly, the fountains of Dirge, the temple of the water dragon, were intentionally poisoned with mortal blood to block her influence. This is remarkably similar to an option available to the Grey Warden in Dragon Age Origins, where you can poison the Urn of Sacred Ashes with blood to corrupt its healing properties. So although we never see someone literally cut themselves and use the blood to cast a spell, I think we see some very blood magic adjacent abilities. Finally, the Spirit of Abbot Song has this to say about blood and power.
For a mortal, blood is life. The sacrifice of blood can have great power, even over the gods. But now is not the time for this discussion.
To summarize, here is a list of facts about magic that are true in both Dragon Age and Jade Empire. We can see there's actually some pretty compelling parallels. Magic seems to work mostly the same. Obviously there's stylistic differences, but overall what's possible with magic and some of the mechanisms behind it are actually pretty congruent between both games. Now, before I move on to the final category, I suppose now is just a good time to say that if you are enjoying the video so far, I'd appreciate it if you like and leave a comment, maybe share it with your fellow Dragon Age or Jade Empire nerd who you think might be interested. Moving on to Cosmology. Basically, now we're going to talk about the structure of the universe, magical realms, and demons and spirits, that kind of thing. So first up is the Fade. In Dragon Age, the Fade is the realm of dreams and spirits. Mortals, except for dwarves, often roam this maddening expanse in a fugue state when they're dreaming. At least their consciousnesses do. Though people don't usually realize they've crossed over into another plane of existence, it just feels like dreaming to them. And it's very rare for someone to physically enter the Fade, and it can typically only occur under extreme circumstances, such as by use of blood magic. This is because of the Veil, which a powerful elf named Fen Harel created thousands of years ago to keep the two worlds separate from each other. The veil can be more thin in some places, strained, or even torn under certain conditions. The Fade is also where spirits and demons dwell. Many are interested in the affairs of mortals for good or ill. In the World of Thedas Volume 1, we learn that there are different ways of experiencing the Fade. One is the Fade's raw form, probably only experienced by mages or while under some kind of magical effect. In the raw Fade, it's a twisted nightmare, and always floating in the distant sky is the Black City, the source of the blight, though you can never actually reach it. This is differentiated from the dreaming Fade, which usually reflects the waking world. This is an illusion created by curious spirits who want to explore and understand mortal emotions. It is also stated that the Fade is separated into smaller realms ruled over by the most influential spirits, and that the Fade's geography varies from realm to realm, but natural laws are mimicked. At some point in the past, the Tevinter Imperium expended a lot of resources to try and chart the Fade, and you can imagine how well that went for them. They cataloged hundreds of types of spirits and found dozens of shifting realms, but ultimately had to abandon the project. In Jade Empire, there are a handful of times where you as the player character interact with supernatural realms. Your first such experience is towards the beginning of the game, when the water dragon pulls your character into a vision. You meditate and your mind enters a place that seems like an echo of the cave room you were in, but with distorted colors and an ethereal quality. When the vision is concluded, you wake up and re-enter the mortal world, which implies that only your consciousness was visiting this other place. This seems an awful lot like the raw Fade, experienced while dreaming, or in this case, receiving a vision. Later, you meet a benevolent, if mischievous, fox spirit called the Forest Shadow, and through a specific ritual, you are able to physically enter her heavenly realm. This place is home to many other fox spirits, and is obviously protected and maintained by them. It's got rainbows and gardens, bridges, and other structures. And the whole thing is floating in some kind of infinite void, similar to how we see in the Fade. However, when you arrive, it's under attack by demons. During an optional quest later on, you can also enter another similar heaven, but this one is the mysterious Lord Lao's furnace, a place of strange artifice and machinery. So in Jade Empire, you actually journey fully into the realm of spirits yourself, because you die, slain by the master you've been looking to rescue throughout the entire game. A betrayal 20 years in the making by the glorious strategist, in a patient bid for world-changing power. As a ghost yourself, you can actually still accomplish things on the other side before madness sets in, sort of similar to maybe what happens to Cole in Dragon Age Inquisition. Here you must fight demons and other ghosts, and restore some of the water dragon's power. This is something you never get to experience in the Dragon Age games, but it seems to match up with what we know about spirits and the Fade. Finally, near the end of the game, when your character lives once again, your mind is attacked remotely by your greatest foe, who drags you into a place that seems much like a Fade nightmare. You are attacked by the angry spirits of your fellow students, or at least evil spirits wearing their faces. The lore behind these extraplanar locations isn't exactly made clear in Jade Empire, but there are definitely some significant similarities to the Fade. It's the realm of spirits and demons, it sometimes mirrors the real world, sometimes not. It is associated with dreams, and there are pockets of stability here and there, usually maintained by powerful spirits. Seems pretty Fade-like to me. And one final point of interest, this is a piece from an old promotional thing for Jade Empire back in its early development, so I wouldn't call it canon by any means, but I still found it interesting.
Here the main character is waking up in the spirit world. The spirit world is a sort of dark shadow of the real world. It is the domain of powerful supernatural creatures like ghosts and demons.
Now, speaking of ghosts and demons, what about the inhabitants of the spiritual realm? In the series of Jade Empire lore entries, The Nature of the Spirit, it is said that spirits feed off of human emotions to sustain themselves, and that they will wander away if they can find none. The unknown writer also makes a clear distinction between spirits of deceased people and other kinds of spirits. There appear to be no discrepancies between how spirits function in Dragon Age, where spirits also feed off of human emotions and are said to be creations of the Maker to be his servants. Also in Jade Empire, in the third entry in the Celestial Order series of lore entries, we get information on the Great Dragon, the supposed creator of the world and of mankind, a maker, if you will. Interestingly, the Great Dragon left his creation behind. People still worship this deity, but he has evidently left the people of the Jade Empire to figure things out on their own. Rather similar to Legends of the Maker in the Chantry of Dragon Age, I would say. Interesting that they both have similar legends regarding their creator. Now, just to get across an idea of the variety of spirits we see in both game series, here are some examples. On the left, we have various spirits and a few creatures classified as demons from Jade Empire, and on the right, we have some entities referred to as spirits in Dragon Age. As you can see, there's a good amount of variety on both sides. Here, we have some creatures from both games that are definitely demons. These ones I find particularly interesting because they match up pretty well with each other. In both Jade Empire and Dragon Age, demons have various classifications, along with typical traits and powers and base-level emotions. On the top left, we have a horse demon, which is a rather weak demon, but is extremely aggressive and uses flames to attack its enemies. On the top right, we have a Dragon Age rage demon, which is weak, aggressive, and uses flames. On the bottom left, we have a bull demon, which is among the most powerful demons in existence, known for its treachery. It uses electricity to attack its enemies. On the bottom right, we have a pride demon from Dragon Age, which is among the most powerful demons in existence, known for being insidious. It uses electricity to attack its enemies. I'll get more into this in the speculation section, but I think spirits and demons are likely to manifest in somewhat different forms depending on the areas in which they lurk. One final note of interest, this time a bit of Dragon Age lore. We don't know anything definitive about this, so it might be a red herring, but in Inquisition, one of the constellation puzzles you solve reveals this piece of lore about a figure called Draconis, which appears to be perhaps a forgotten 8th Old Tevinter god. It definitely flies, but it doesn't have wings, and is more serpentine in appearance. Could this be a borrowed myth with limited interactions with cultures or spirits from the Jade Empire, and a reference to either the water dragon or the mythical creator of the world, the Great Dragon? To summarize the cosmology section, here are some facts that are true about both the Jade Empire and Dragon Age. Now again, I don't think this in and of itself is conclusive evidence, but I think it supports the evidence that we do have with the mysterious West and mysterious East. Alright, I have presented pretty much all of the evidence for these two settings sharing the same world that I could come up with. I might have missed a few minor details, but I think I covered all the major ones. So now comes the real speculation in trying to line up these two worlds with some story time. Most everything up to this point was just stating facts about both game series, with bits of extrapolation here and there, but now we're closer to theory crafting and headcanon territory. So here's what I think happened. Here's a rough model of what the larger Jade Thedas region might look like. So I made this map working under the assumption that the Volca Sea opens out into a larger ocean, effectively creating two separate continents. I find this the most likely option, but it's not the only one. It could instead be that the two land masses are connected, much like Europe and Asia are connected in the real world, and the Volca Sea is simply an inland sea that effectively splits the two areas from each other, with overland travel through the Dawn Arcs or the colder lands to the south being mostly too difficult to traverse for whatever reason. Also, the orientation of the Jade Empire map isn't exactly clear. I realized shortly before making this video that I was assuming north was up on the map in Jade Empire, but Tian's Landing is said to be in the south, and the fact that the Great Southern Forest is located nearby makes me think that it might actually be oriented sideways like this, or maybe some angle in between. It doesn't really matter for our purposes, but I thought it was worth showing the different possibilities. Returning briefly to the geography of the Fade, I think it's actually pretty likely that the Fade has its own kind of geography. Not that it actually has literal physical geography, but that it responds to people's dreams based on where they are. We've already seen that there are different realms inside the Fade, with powerful demons or spirits who control their domains and keep them stable, so there's at least a sense of location, even if traveling between areas is less like a line and more like a thought. But I think the Fade is all one continuous realm, but there are different regions of the Fade that are difficult to cross between. And that's because they respond to the physical world. So Dreamers and Thedas are mostly going to be in the Thedas version of the Fade, and Dreamers and Jade Empire are going to dream in the Jade Empire version of the Fade. There's not going to be a lot of crossover just because of the kinds of Dreamers that there are and where they are in relation to each other. So going through events chronologically, not covering everything, just the bits that are relevant for our purposes. So when the Veil is created by Fen-Harel, I think it mostly just covers Thedas. I think the Veil and the Fade in this area are very localized, and they don't actually affect things in other places as much. It would also explain why the Fade in Thedas is much scarier and spookier than the supernatural spiritual realm we see in Jade Empire, because of the weight of the blight and just like the sin and all the horrors that are occurring in Thedas, with mages being possessed and tormented, and that's basically why the Fade is so scary in Thedas. Meanwhile, in the Jade Empire, we've got the celestial bureaucracy. I haven't talked about this yet. This is basically an order of gods and spirits that sort of manage reality in a certain way. They're custodians of the Fade. And like I said, I think the celestial bureaucracy has their own version of the Veil, but instead of it being this creation that was made and sustained by the Evanuris, it's maintained by the spirits and gods of the celestial bureaucracy who decide who's allowed to cross back and forth. Obviously, creatures can slip through the cracks, but for the most part, they manage who's allowed to cross back and forth. Spirits who were given permission to cross over into the physical world are people like Zinbu or Chai Ka, the Forest Shadow, and Lord Lao, among others. They employ various spirits and guardians to prevent demons from being able to cross over to the physical world to possess things like corpses, trees, and even people. It doesn't always work, but it's much better here than it is in Thedas, where there is no such organization. There's just the Veil, which again can be thinner in some places or even tear and rip in other places. Another major responsibility of the celestial bureaucracy is the shepherding of souls into the Great Wheel, in the Jade Empire anyway, since departed souls in Thedas seldom wander far from their homeland. The water dragon is assigned to this task, and when someone dies, She collects their spirit from the Fade and delivers it to be reincarnated in some form or other, a process that's unique to the Jade Empire and facilitated by the celestial bureaucracy. Again, there's no such organization in Thedas, so souls simply linger until they go mad or become a part of the Fade in a messy process that often results in shades and mad spirits. Which we do see, in fact, in Jade Empire. When the Water Dragon is not able to do her job, we see a lot more shades and mad spirits in Jade Empire. Part of the reason the celestial bureaucracy's control is so effective, however, is that there is no lyrium in the Jade Empire, or at least very little, probably traded for the most part. If the Titans also shaped the lands beyond Thedas, they did not dwell in the Jade Empire, so there are no veins of lyrium to mine. In Thedas, lyrium is used by Templars, mages, and dwarven craftsmen to produce a variety of effects, and it's also closely linked with the Fade, even acting as a kind of bridge between the two worlds. Without lyrium, spirits and demons have much fewer opportunities to interact with the mortal world, unless the veil is especially thin in certain places. Even though the Jade Empire doesn't have lyrium, they do have innate magical talents, just without the power boost of lyrium. But for that purpose, they do have blood, and blood magic is usable everywhere. It's how they make golems, it's how you can magically take control of people or bind their spirits, and it's how you can corrupt a god. Moving forward in the timeline, we actually have lore references in Dragon Age of dwarves who built taigs on the surface during the time period before the Blight. They were trying to escape some kind of war or threat of war. It's not exactly clear, but in the Hissing Wastes, there's a forgotten taig called Calabrapartha on the surface that had been long abandoned by the time of the Dragon Age. And there are similar structures found in Parvalin that have long fallen to ruin as well. And we also know that Kal Sharok was experiencing some struggles when the capital moved to Orzammar. Orzammar was imposing heavy taxes and everything on Kal Sharok, and the dwarves there were getting fed up with it. And it's actually explicitly called out a couple times in the timeline in World of Thedas Volume 1. So I think there was actually a splinter group of dwarves from Kal Sharok who wanted no part of this anymore. So some of them went to the surface in the Hissing Wastes and made Calabrapartha. Some of them went across the sea to Parvalin, and some of them went across the Volca Sea to the west to see what was over there. So we have an exodus of dwarves from Kal Sharok who go across into what would become the Jade Empire, or what is already the Jade Empire, and create the Voshai. They help build the city of Phoenix Gate itself, which is why they are so respected later on, and why they are given so much power and authority in their trade voyages back to Thedas. Going back over to Thedas, they have the Blight, which is a big problem. Now, it does not extend to other realms, or at least not to the Jade Empire. This is because the Blight surrounds the slumbering archdemons, and these high dragons are buried throughout Thedas and nowhere else. If left unchecked and undefeated, the armies of Darkspawn would surely move on to other lands after consuming Thedas, but they have, as of yet, been unable to do so. Time moves on, blights come and go, and the people endure, humans, elves, and dwarves alike. By the time of the Black Age, this would be about 400 years before the events of the Dragon Age games, the people of the Jade Empire become curious about this fabled homeland of the dwarves, who describe veins of magical lyrium, which they have never seen before. By this point, the dwarves and humans have come together to create a prestigious merchant class called the Voshai. Maybe this is a word in the local language, shorthand for Phoenix Gate Trading Company, or something similar, or maybe it's just a proper noun. Either way, they begin crafting powerful vessels that can brave the dangers of the Glass Ocean once again, to begin trade relations with the peoples of Thedas, if they're even still alive. And then traditionally, or perhaps contractually, each of these Voshai ships is captained by a dwarf, thanks to their heavy involvement in both the development of the prosperous East, their advanced knowledge of seafaring, and for their ancestral connection to Thedas itself. And at least some of the Voshai ships are able to successfully navigate to Thedas and back to engage in trade. The Voshai sell silks and spices, which the people of the Anderfels purchase using lyrium and metals. The town of Laish is formed, with its entire economy and existence reliant on trade from the Jade Empire directly. Partway through the Black Age, the Voshai ships stop coming. No one in Thedas is sure why, but it's actually because of a massive invasion from the land of the Horse Lords, led by a man named Zheng Sai, the tree that defies the fire. This is a real event in the lore of Jade Empire, and it shook the entire empire. nearly resulting in the total destruction of the entire civilization. This bloody conflict prevented Jade Empire from being able to divert resources to trade with faraway Thedas. Perhaps Phoenix Gate itself was assaulted, and ships and shipyards were burned. It was only due to the involvement of the spirit monks that Zhang Sai and his warlords were vanquished and the armies driven back. Suddenly without trade, the town of Laish is struggling. Thedosian attempts to cross the Glass Ocean are met with no success due to their inferior shipbuilding techniques and the dangerous nature of the sea, including certain supernatural threats. Laish eventually dissolves, and the Tevinter merchant houses stop trying to cross the ocean entirely. 200 years later, in the Steel Age, the Qunari evolve on Thedas for the first time, conquering the Tevinter island of Parvalin. Then we come to the Dragon Age itself, and the events of Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2, where Thedas skipped the last blight due to the actions of the Architect, an intelligent darkspawn. And now the people are unprepared. In recent years, there have been reports of Voshai ships journeying once again to Laish, or what's left of it, speaking of some kind of cataclysm in their homeland. This wouldn't be the Horse Lord invasion, that was hundreds of years ago. No, the most recent troubles have to do with the long drought. The Jade Empire is experiencing an ecological disaster, parching the land and her people. And the rule of the current emperor, Sun Hai, is put into question if he cannot save his people from thirst and withering crops. So, Emperor Sun Hai and his two brothers, Sun Li and Sun Qin, look for a solution to save their people from starvation and thirst. They invade the peaceful temple of Dirge to seize the power of the water dragon for themselves, to spill her infinite blood as water to feed the nation. The actual event goes unnoticed by the people, who only know that their emperor found a way to save them all, and the people prosper, but at a cost. With the water dragon captured and suffering infinitely, there is no one left to shepherd the dead back into the Great Wheel. So their spirits linger to torment the living. This kind of thing happens pretty often in Thedas, with shades and spirits wandering or possessing the dead, but in the Jade Empire it's practically unheard of. And probably due to the water dragon's torment, the problem is compounded. If she had simply been killed, then the Great Wheel would be allowed to turn, and most spirits would be allowed to pass on in some way. Instead, they're stuck waiting and being driven mad. This crisis continues for 20 years. The few Voshai people who journey to Thedas speak of this great catastrophe, about dead spirits and walking corpses. And people from Thedas are just like, yeah, isn't that just the way things are? What are you talking about? That's why we always burn our dead, so they can't get up and kill us. Except for Navarra, but they're weirdos. And while this is all going on in Jade Empire, the events of Inquisition and Veilguard take place. Corypheus, one of the original Magisters Sidereal, has risen and is waging war with all of Thedas. He's defeated by the Inquisitor and 941 Dragon. And then only 11 years later, Thedas faces a new disaster when two blighted Evanuris, Elgar'nan and Gillenane, escape their prison in the Fade and attempt to destroy all of Thedas and turn it into a realm of blight that they can reshape according to their desires. These events go largely unnoticed in the Jade Empire, since the Elven gods currently have no influence there, and are concerned with restoring their old Elven empire first and foremost, or at least a twisted version of it. If they had not been stopped by Rook and the Veilguard, they would surely turn their attentions to the Jade Empire, as well as other lands such as Amaranth and the Northern Islands, after taking control of Thedas. I haven't yet spoken about celestial objects. This would be a pretty good piece of evidence if both Dragon Age and Jade Empire said they had the same number of moons and stuff like that. Thedas is said to have 2 moons, the second one being called Satina. We've never seen it though. In Jade Empire, the number of moons is never specified or spoken of. However, we do know that eclipses are a recognized celestial phenomenon, so there's at least 1 moon in Jade Empire. And I can't ever recall actually seeing both moons in the sky in any Dragon Age game. Let me know if you can find a skybox that shows both, just because I'd be curious to see them. I don't believe you ever see a moon in the sky in Jade Empire either. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because during the final events of Veilguard, Elgar'nan yanks the moon into place to force an eclipse so he can complete an important ritual on his own timeline. This event is likely to be noticed in the Jade Empire, though of course no mention is made of it in the lore. That's not surprising though, considering Jade Empire and Veilguard came out almost 20 years apart from each other. Even if the 2 game series were publicly acknowledged and marketed as being part of the same world, it would not be surprising to see an inconsistency like that. And there are plenty of inconsistencies just within the Dragon Age series itself. At any rate, we do know that people in the Jade Empire are aware of eclipses, and it even states in the lore that eclipses are times during which the power of the gods blocks the sun for brief periods. which is probably just an interesting coincidence that in this case, this is pretty much literally what happens with Elgar'nan. So either the scholars noticed this anomaly and discussed it at great length off screen, or maybe it was just cloudy that day. Now, with the timeline, now we're in the future of Thedas, post-Veilguard. In the years following these events, Gatlock, or Black Powder, has leaked out of Qunari control because of course it did. It was only a matter of time, of course. And the Orlesians take a particular interest in the development of firearms, seeing it as a way to finally gain an edge against the mages of the Tevinter Imperium. Maybe they're planning another Exalted March, this one armed with guns and bombs. Anyway, one especially obnoxious noble by the name of Sir Roderick acquires a personal firearm for himself and names it Mirabelle. He's infamous in his homeland for his ridiculous title, manners, and outlooks on the world because he inexplicably doesn't believe magic is real. He thinks it's all a massive hoax, even when he sees physical proof, and he simply cannot be persuaded otherwise. So, at the insistence of his own people, Roderick sets out onto the Volca Sea to find adventure elsewhere. His ship is blown off course by whatever strange forces are at work in the Glass Ocean, and then he wrecks in the land of the Voshai, in the prosperous east, being one of the first Thedosians to successfully make it to the Jade Empire. Roderick eventually journeys to the Imperial City, picking up the local language along the way, and continuing to disbelieve the existence of spirits and magic wherever he goes. There, he meets a local hero, the last of the spirit monks from Dirge, before he is ousted from bothering the scholars and philosophers in the Scholars' Garden. Now we're in the midst of the events of the Jade Empire video game. The spirit monk, along with the help of their companions, goes on a journey to save the Jade Empire, or conquer it. You know, it's a BioWare game, so whatever you want to do. The remainder of the events in the game unfold according to the player's decisions, which I'm actually not going to spoil more here than I've already done. One more thing, though. One of the spirit monk's companions is a bloodthirsty mercenary by the name of Black Whirlwind. In the epilogue of Jade Empire, it states that he works for the celestial bureaucracy for a while, but he gets bored and wanders off to the east. Afterwards, the Jade Empire starts seeing an influx of more Outlanders, many of them with missing body parts, no doubt due to the Black Whirlwind's appetite for violence. Whirlwind inexplicably circumnavigates the entire globe and reappears on the western edge of the Jade Empire, having no idea how he did so. Here's what that journey might have looked like. This is a newer mock-up I've made of the larger planet. Again, this is all purely guesswork when it comes to the exact shape and location of these places. However, according to the fold-out map of Thedas that came with the Dragon Age RPG rulebook, the scale of that map we're familiar with is 70 miles per inch. So I measured the width of the map and plugged it into Google Maps to figure out roughly how much space on the globe Thedas would take up, assuming it's the same size as Earth, roughly. Turns out it's a little over half the width of the continental US. So anyway, putting everything together, we have a pretty decent idea of the land masses that can be found in the southern hemisphere, on this side of the planet anyway. We know nothing of what's on the northern hemisphere, though, unless Parlati or the land of the Horse Lords extends that far. Or if the homeland of the Qunari is both north and east, since there are conflicting reports on that, assuming it's not Amaranth. Anyway, if Black Whirlwind did circumnavigate the globe, he probably had to go through whatever is over in Amaranth to do it. Or maybe he just sailed around it, or maybe he took a shortcut in the south near the Sunless Lands. That's pretty much it. I could keep speculating on various spirits, gods, and ancient bits of lore and uses of magic, like how major villains in both Jade Empire and Dragon Age 2 transform nearby statues into massive foes in their respective boss battles, or how the Qunari and the ogres from Jade Empire might share a common ancestor of some kind, maybe the ancient Kossiths, but this video is long enough as it is. I will say that there are multiple different ways to interpret the timeline here, assuming we're cooking with gas here and they are in the same world. I went with the one that made the most sense to me, though admittedly the exact sequence of events I've laid out does pretty much hinge on the character of Sir Roderick. If we do decide to dismiss that part of the game as non-canonical or a continuity error of some kind, it becomes easier to shift the timeline around a bunch. Jade Empire could take place before Origins rather than after Veilguard, for example. The only historical touchstones we have for the Voshai are that they traded with Laish during the beginning of the Black Age and then stopped abruptly. And then they started coming back to Thedas in recent years, talking about a calamity of some kind. So do with that what you will. I guess the last question to consider is whether the writers at BioWare made these connections intentionally, or whether I'm just looking for links because I want it to be true, or a blend of the two. So now we're looking beyond the in-world lore, and now we're examining the meta of the real world with game development schedules and marketing and all that kind of stuff. In preparation for this video, on top of the massive amount of lore research and gathering of assets, I also did a good amount of research into the development of both Jade Empire and Dragon Age. And by that I mean I listened to a bunch of interviews, dug through game credits, and found a bunch of old footage to sift through. So I'm by no means an expert. I'm sure people out there know way more than I do, and can provide better context or a more complete picture. But here's what I was able to come up with. The links to these videos are in the description. This is an interview with Mark Darrah, who was a programmer and sometimes director, various roles on Dragon Age titles as well as Jade Empire. And at around the 26-minute mark of this interview on TK Games with Mark Darrah, he responds to a viewer comment asking about whether Mass Effect and Dragon Age might be in the same universe. He says basically no, because the world of Thedas being just another planet in the Mass Effect galaxy or universe would sort of trivialize everything in Dragon Age. Later he states that if there was a connection between different games, like between Dragon Age and Anthem, the bridge connecting them would need to be fairly thin to prevent the crossover from negatively affecting either series. The topic of Jade Empire is not brought up here, but I can't help but wonder what his answer would have been for that. From my perspective, the harshness of the Volca Sea and that divide between Jade Empire and Thedas makes it seem an awful lot like that thin bridge. And it's interesting to at least see that the topic of crossover worlds is something that was thought about by BioWare staff at the time. Here's another interview. This one is with Mike Laidlaw, who was a major writer and director role on Jade Empire and Dragon Age titles. And during this interview, again, link in the description, at around the 1 hour mark, he says, the majority of the leadership of Jade Empire 2, the people who were really passionate vision holders, are all on Dragon Age. So BioWare was for a little while working on a sequel to Jade Empire, but it was scrapped at an early stage in development. But this sort of frames it interestingly that many of the people who were working on Dragon Age were also incredibly passionate about Jade Empire. I can imagine feeling a little bit deflated about seeing this unexplored IP just sitting there, gathering dust and wanting to give it some speck of relevance in a larger, more successful project. This is an interview with David Gaider, who was essentially the creator of the Dragon Age setting. As far as I can tell based on interviews, Gaider worked on pretty much every BioWare game since the Neverwinter Nights expansions, except for Jade Empire and Mass Effect until he left the company. And he was tasked specifically with developing the world of Dragon Age. Obviously, there was a lengthy creative process with pushback and feedback and modifications and iterations, but Gaider is widely credited as being the father of Thedas. And because Gaider wasn't involved in Jade Empire, or at least he isn't credited, I just assumed he didn't really know about it or hadn't had much exposure to it, being busy as he was with developing the Dragon Age setting from scratch. So I was surprised when I was listening to this interview, and at around the 49-minute mark, he makes mention of Jade Empire. In this clip, he compares Dragon Age Origins to Jade Empire, talking about how they weren't sure at the time that Origins would ever get a sequel. Here's the clip.
Yeah, at the time, if the idea that maybe that Dragon Age Origins would have to live on its own as its own game, and I mean, like Jade Empire never got a sequel, so at the time it didn't seem so impossible.
Never say never.
We would put out a game. Yeah, never say never. That would be awesome. Jade Empire 2. Woo!
That sounds to me like a man who's itching for a Jade Empire sequel just as much as the rest of us. When he was putting together Thedas, was he pulling bits of inspiration from BioWare's most recent fantasy game, Jade Empire? No idea, but he at least liked it a lot and is excited about it. Who is responsible for connecting the Dragon Age franchise to BioWare's forgotten gem, Jade Empire, if anyone? I can find a few possible candidates. Here's a list of people who might be responsible, who at least had some storytelling input or decision-making, or worked on the World of Thedas Volume 2. That's where we get the lore about the Voshai. So if anyone at BioWare or with them is responsible for, putting this little thread in there, I'm guessing it's someone on this list on the screen right now. But obviously I just don't know for sure, but I'd be very curious to know if anyone can help me figure that out. All right, so what's the verdict? Obviously, this theory is just a theory. It's not official, it's not canon, it's maybe not even true. It might just be an Easter egg with a question mark, it might be nothing. Maybe BioWare had different plans for the Voshai and the Mysterious West, and it's just a funny coincidence. I think there's some pretty compelling stuff to this theory, but pretty much the only thing that would confirm it is if a piece of official Dragon Age media was released that specifically called out the Jade Empire as being across the Volca Sea, or for a character from Jade Empire to appear in Dragon Age in a non-Easter egg way, or vice versa for a new Jade Empire game to come out and reference Thedas. But the truth is, it's extremely unlikely that we'll ever see another piece of original Jade Empire media. And now, it's looking like Dragon Age is the same way after Veilguard. Pretty much all of the writers have been let go or have moved on from BioWare. More than ever before, it seems like Dragon Age is dead, as stated very succinctly in this meme, which is amusing, but I actually do appreciate the context behind the original quote. Here's the original post from former Dragon Age writer Cheryl Chi, though it now looks like both the post and the account have been deleted as of the time of this recording, so I hope I'm not stepping out of line in sharing this, but I do love the sentiment. Dragon Age isn't dead. There's fiction, there's art, there's the connections we made through the games and because of the games. Technically, EA and BioWare own the IP, but you can't own an idea, no matter how much they want to. Dragon Age isn't dead because it's yours now. I love Dragon Age and I love Jade Empire. Every one of these games is a bit messy. They're not perfect. Some make bigger blunders than others. But they all have heart, and they all tell good stories, putting you at the front of the action and forcing you to reflect on your decisions. And I think that's incredible. If Dragon Age belongs to us now, then I'm going to keep living in that world. Every few years, I'll return to replay the games. And for me at least, I'm including Jade Empire in that list. And whenever I get around to running a Dragon Age tabletop campaign, you better believe that in my version of the world, there's a certain Jade Empire located just across the Volca Sea, and my players might just have a chance to get to visit Phoenix Gate for the first time. Alright, thanks for watching through to the end. This video took a long time to make. I have been planning on making it for literal years and have been slowly chipping away at it with notes and everything. When I finally got around to finishing Veilguard recently, I figured now's the time. I know this isn't my usual type of upload, and a lot of people are just here for the tabletop RPG design stuff, but the plan has always been to experiment with a lot of different types of video until I really nail down what I want to do with this channel. So don't worry, I will get back to RPG design content eventually, though as you already know, my upload schedule can't even really be called a schedule. As always, I have an idea surplus and a time deficit, so it is what it is. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.